9 o'clock, December 12th, 2012. I'd like to welcome all of you to today's meeting. I would like to remind you that this meeting is being broadcast over the internet. Also, if you do have cell phones, if you would, at least while you're here, put them on silent, which I'll do right now. Very good. Agenda item number 2 is approval of the minutes of the September 19th, 2012 meeting on the Committee of Affordability, Accountability, and Planning. Are there any questions, concerns concerning the minutes? If not, is there a motion to approve?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item number 3 is consideration of approval of the consent calendar for the committee. Is there any discussion? Are there any questions? If not, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Agenda item number 4 is public testimony on items relating to the Committee on Strategic Planning and Policy. Let me just double check, but I don't believe we have anyone registered to testify. Is that correct, Linda? No, nobody's signed up to testify? Okay.
We've had oh no, I'm sorry, I'm thinking about the cause committee.
Okay.
So, thanks.
We do want everyone to know that we're enthusiastic. If you do have comments or concerns, please sign up. I believe you're required to do that within 24 hours of the committee meeting, and that's via the website. Is that correct, Linda? Okay, very good. Agenda item 5A is consideration of staff recommendation to the board for approval of construction, rehabilitation, and property purchase projects. Texas A&M University System construction of the pandemic influenza facility, 8801 Health Science Center Parkway in Bryan, Texas. Mr. Dan Kennedy, Director of Project Planning, Texas A&M University, will provide the presentation. Welcome, gentlemen.
Now we are, I think. Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Hahn. And committee, I have with me Mr. Brett Compton today, who is the Manager of Facilities for the federal development that we're going to be presenting to you today. But Brett's here to help answer any questions that you may have about the program and the project. But the A&M system is seeking coordinating board approval to construct the pandemic influenza facility, as you see on the screen there, that project. Go to the next. But this overall facility is part of a contract with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to develop a center of innovation and advanced development and manufacturing at Texas A&M. And this pandemic influenza facility will fulfill a contract requirement to provide U.S.-based biopharmaceutical production surge capacity for pandemic influenza vaccine and other threats. The construction site, if you can back up one slide there. The construction site will be located in the designated bio-corridor area of the Bryan College Station area, just to the west of the A&M campus and to the north of Easterwood Airport. This slide shows particular data about the project. The total budget is $78,431,373, which is a good exact federal government budget there. Not $2, but $3. And so anyway, that was arrived at in negotiations with the government, and the funding will be cashed through federal funds and state funds. The estimated date for the project to be up and running for its intended purpose is January 2016. And this includes an approximate 1-year period of quality assurance and validation testing for verification of compliance with the Food and Drug Administration. So it's quite a period to get the project up and running, a validation testing and that type of thing. You can go to the next one there. The pandemic influenza facility will be the first building on an approximate 20-acre greenfield site fronting on Health Science Center Parkway, and also master plan for additional facility development in the future. Included in the pandemic influenza project will be clean rooms for vaccine manufacturing, quality control labs, manufacturing process support spaces, sterile storage spaces for materials and final product, decontamination room with autoclaves, buffer and media preparation rooms, office spaces, and a central utility plant. Go to the next slide. This is a perspective of the facility looking south from the Health Science Center Parkway. Go to the next one. The project meets all applicable coordinating board parameters. However, the project was not included on the MP1 report for the A&M system, as the project was originally planned as a private development. But during contract negotiations with the Department of Health and Human Services, the responsibility for delivering the building was given to the A&M system. But this agreement occurred after the MP1 update forms were due, and therefore was not included on the MP1 because it was not anticipated at the time we were putting the MP1s together. But that's the project. Does anybody have any questions about it? We're asking for. I guess this will be for full board approval due to that size, but we're asking for coordinating board approval for this project.
How many jobs will this create? Estimate?
I haven't seen the numbers on that. I can find out and get back with you if you'd like.
Just curious.
Right.
A lot.
It's going to be a big facility. It's about 150,000 square feet, and so it's going to be a lot of work going on there. So hopefully that will generate into jobs and people working in there.
Excellent. Members, yes, Doctor.
Can you back up 2 slides, please? First off, congratulations on behalf of the state in getting this. Can you explain to me the colored area? Is that part of the building on this schematic?
The red colored area is this facility. There is another future building that's shown in the white right there below it that we'll be probably bringing to you. Is that the live virus?
Yes.
That we'll be bringing that project to you probably at the next meeting or sometime in the near future. But the red colored area is the pandemic influenza facility that we're talking about with this application.
Okay, and can you back up 1 more slide, please? And I noticed this is right off your east-west runway there. Somebody's obviously considered that it's going to not have any impact on the use of the airport facility, and safety concerns are not there regarding the building being in that corridor? I
think this is going to be a single-story facility. The heights and stuff have all been checked out with the runway approach slopes and things like that. So it's not going to infringe upon the operation of the airport.
Great. So I move approval.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Thank you very much. We
Thank you very much.
Facility. We may have some folks that we'd like to have a personal tour of the live virus area when you get that going.
You get a short list for the testing phase?
That's right, yeah. Thank you very much. University of Texas Medical Branch at Galveston is the next item. Construct Victory Lakes Specialty Care Center expansion, 2044 Gulf Freeway South in League City, Texas. Mr. Michael R. Schreiner, Vice President of Facilities and Campus Services of the University of Texas Medical Branch at Galveston, will provide a presentation. Good morning, Mr. Schreiner. If you'll turn your mic on, just push that little red button there.
Does that work, Ben?
Yes, that's
All right.
much better. Thank you.
The project we have before you today is located on our Victory Lakes campus. This is a 63-acre campus essentially equidistant between Houston and Galveston. UTMB acquired that particular piece of property in the years between 2005 and 2008, really looking at our strategic direction, looking at the unmet needs of the growing population in the League City area for medical services. And as it has turned out, it has allowed us to have a very good answer to the issue of having geographic diversity for risk management. As we've seen with Hurricane Ike and other events that could occur on just about any campus, the ability to have alternate sites in which to shift patient load and patient volume in times of disaster are critically important to the community. So this particular campus has become more important to us in the last few years as we look at mitigating risks for the healthcare enterprise and for providing care to the public. We had roughly 680,000 clinic visits in 2012, and over 65% of those were actually from clinics off of our main site and out in the various communities. Next slide, please. The master development plan for this campus has been reviewed recently in 2008 by the Board of Regents in response to the acquisition of some additional property that brought us to the full 63 acres. It's essentially organized around a large traffic circle, giving a inward focus for the campus. The south half of this property is identified to be patient care, and then the north half will provide locations for academic, administrative, and support activities. In the initial phase, which is shown on this slide as a white building, the initial phase was completed in 2010. That is a 110,000 square foot specialty care center. It includes day surgery, women's services, orthopedics clinics, pediatrics clinics, and imaging center. It also includes some fairly important aspects for us today, and that is the clinical laboratory, pharmacy, and oncology treatment. The next step for our campus development is to expand the patient care on this site. We believe that next step should include the short stay beds that you're seeing on this project that's under consideration today. Next slide. So for your approval today, we are presenting a project of 140,000 square foot, shown here in the blue block. It's basically an expansion to our existing outpatient clinic building. It will provide 39 short stay beds, 17 emergency treatment rooms, 2 additional operating rooms, some expanded imaging. In addition, we're going to have 25,000 square foot of shell space within this building and provisions for vertical expansion as the site will no doubt require in the future. Total project cost is $82 million. It's a good investment for UTMB. We're leveraging some of the assets that we have there now. You can imagine as an outpatient facility, we are running routine 8 to 10 hour days with operating rooms, clinical lab, and pharmacy. By bringing on short stay beds, inpatient beds, we will be able to leverage that investment and use those assets for the support of these 39 inpatient beds. Next slide, please. The proposed project is a 3-story building expanding to the east on this site, essentially matching the architecture of the existing building. We presented this project to the Board of Regents in August of this year to add it to our capital improvement plan. It's a fairly quickly moving project. After it was approved for the inclusion in our CIP, we selected the design build firm and have brought this back to the University of Texas Board of Regents at their November meeting for final approval of funding and the authorization to move forward with construction. We now have it in front of you, and with your approval, we are planning to move into construction in February with a 24-month construction timeline for this project. Next slide, please. This project does meet the criteria of the coordinating board. We understand it's a quick one, but we believe it's been well conceived and certainly as part of our long-term development plan. We respectfully request your approval of this project this morning.
Thank you very much. Members, questions? Not. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any further discussion, questions?
What are the other local funds? What are the source of those funds?
Patient care revenue is our primary source of local funds for UTMB.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Not. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Durga, I think you're aware of this, but I just want to remind you that as you can see us, we can also see you. Okay? So you are on the screen.
I
Yeah.
think he was listening.
Durga, did you hear me? Earth calling Durga. Can you hear me, Durga? I don't know how to hand sign Durga, so all right. Well, we'll move ahead. Okay. The next item on the agenda, with the board's permission, or with the committee's permission, I want to delay. Dr. Paredes wanted to be here for that presentation. He had a meeting, and does anyone have any opposition to delaying that until his arrival? No? Okay. We'll go to the next item for now and come back to that particular one. Items 5B, 1 through 5 were on the consent calendar. Item 5C is a report on facilities decisions of projects certified to meet the requirements of the expedited process for approval. Any questions? Susan, do you have any comment on those?
Mr. Chairman, I have just a question, really just to kind of want an update so we can keep a running tally. What does this bring the total to in terms of the number and value of projects that have gone through the certification process?
I'm going to have to get that for you and let you know. Tom can get it. We can have it by the end of the meeting.
I think this may bring it to about $3.6 billion, but
That's B?
With a B, but I'm going from memory.
I know it was already over $3 billion, but I can't remember how much over.
Okay. I would just wanted to kind of keep a
okay, we can
rolling
add a
tally
rolling
of that
pile.
in front of this for this committee's benefit.
Okay.
That is an outrageous number, Mr. Chairman.
Is there any other discussion on item 5C? If not, we'll move to item 5D, presentation by Texas Women's University on future campus plans for the institution. Dr. Ann Stewart, Chancellor and President, Mr. Harold Johnson, Associate Vice President of Facilities Management and Construction, and Dr. Brenda Floyd, Vice President for Finance and Administration, with the Texas Women's University, will be available to answer any questions regarding the information in the presentation.
I'm Ann Stewart.
Hi, Ann.
How are you?
Did the rest of them ditch you or what?
They're about 8 minutes away.
Okay. Would you like for us to wait, or would you like to go ahead?
Maybe we wait?
Does anybody have any problem with that? We'll come back to that item also.
We're ready to go as soon as they get.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, that takes us to item 5E, discussion of proposed rule relating to facilities project, including student fees. Susan Brown, Assistant Commissioner of Planning and Accountability, is available for questions. Sounds like you're a little hoarse this morning.
Just a little bit.
How to get her some salt water.
Cough drops are your friend. You'll find at your place what the proposed rules are. They have been posted. They have not gone through the entire 30 days at this point. We wanted to give y'all a chance to have a discussion about them. However, we did just this morning about 8:45 get a letter from UT System about them. I have not had time to read the letter, but all of that will be in the packet for the January board meeting. So you should, I think that were they in the books? Right behind your blue page in your book, you should have a copy of it. Basically, all we did is add to Chapter 17, make it very explicit that the board may consider the financial impact of projects on the students. And then we added on subchapter C, we added a statement that said, if a project causes any increase in student fees, that then the student fees can account for no more than 75% of the total project cost. So those were the two changes we suggested for under y'all's direction to discuss. I will say that we have sent something to the AG's office to make sure that we did have authority, and we got a response that we do have the authority to add this as a part of looking at being good stewards for the state.
Discussion?
Susan, how long has this been posted for public comment?
It's only been posted about 15 days or so.
About half the period?
It's only about halfway there. We usually don't get comments till the very end.
But we haven't received any?
We got one this morning at about 8:45. I haven't read it yet, so I don't even know what it says.
All right.
We generally don't get comments till the last 2 or 3 days. That's when the majority of the comments will come in.
Maybe we should change the comment period to 10 days and, that we accelerate by 20 days.
People go.
I don't think we have the authority for that.
Yeah, that might be above our pay grade.
That one we don't have the authority.
I support us tightening the rules on this. We've discussed it at several board or committee meetings. I don't know how to make a recommendation to the board without seeing all the comments, and so I'm not certain that, Mr. Chairman, that I'm really prepared.
You're not supposed to vote. This is a discussion item only.
And I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying I'm not prepared to vote.
Okay, good.
Even if I was supposed to, I'm not prepared to because I haven't seen the comments.
Yes.
I'm a little troubled by the language, under no circumstances. That means there's no way around it.
Okay.
I think the board needs latitude. If there's a project that comes in with 76%, 75 is an arbitrary number. I'd like to see 50%, but that doesn't mean we're always going to get that. So I'm a little troubled by that, and I'm just putting that comment out there. The other is that we had a lot of concern expressed by myself and other board members about the voting process, or the lack of a voting process, and participation of the students in that voting process. I'd like to see us put some type of a benchmark up there, asking that the students be required to participate if they're going to vote to go along with raising their student fees. So I'm just putting that out there, that I'd like to see something there. I don't think it's unreasonable to have half the student body vote for something. And I think that by putting that out there as a benchmark, would encourage the administrations of those universities seeking those additional student fees for whatever worthy purpose they thought to be innovative about the way that they gain additional participation.
I think those are good comments. And if we could we possibly discuss this at the board meeting and vote on it?
Isn't that the plan?
Yes. Yes. That is the plan. And
Yeah,
we'll
the
have all
only thing that I would add, David, is that your first comment I would agree with. I think the phrase "under no circumstances" is perhaps too constraining. Although I think 75% is a reasonable benchmark to establish, but the board probably should build in some latitude for unforeseeable circumstances, whatever those might be. The other thing I would just say is I think it's extremely difficult for us to set any either minimum turnout or minimum majority benchmarks for student voting when student voting is just a mirror of our society's voter turnout. That doesn't mean we shouldn't encourage institutions to encourage better participation. We should. It doesn't strike me as very feasible for us to try to set a minimum requirement. You know, it's kind of like beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder. You know it when you see it, kind of thing. So I think that would be quite a challenge to come up with something that the institutions would consider reasonable parameters they could live within. I'd rather see us look for ways to encourage and incentivize institutions to, try different means of a student vote when it comes to student fees. Some of the ideas that we talked about or that Ryan brought up, like, at registration, for example, or, looking for means that might move the needle from, a low 5 or 10% turnout to maybe you get, who knows, 20, 25% or whatever is possible.
I don't disagree with you, and I'm not wed to particular language that sets a benchmark of what that number needs to be. But as an alternative, we could include an additional item in there that the institution will use methodology in order to encourage maximum participation in the voting process. That's a fairly nebulous feel-good, but it certainly tells the institutions, we're looking at this. We want to see, if you have low participation, we want to know what you did to try to get people to participate in that process. So, without setting a number, we could set a standard saying that part of our criteria will be how did you encourage the students to vote, and were you successful in doing that?
Which again will be arbitrary.
Yes.
But I do,
Which is a lot of what we do.
but it does make a statement, and I think that's important that is a priority. I completely agree. You can't set a number, but I do think that we can look for variety of methodologies, and that there was a true effort to try and have as higher percentages as possible and make it as accessible to as many students as is possible. So I do think that kind of language along the lines that you're saying, David, does make a statement about what we think is important and what should go along in the process.
I'd like to weigh in on this just for a second. I agree.
Good morning, Dennis.
Good morning. I'm sorry I'm a little bit late, but I'm here.
We're glad to have you.
Well, thank you. I agree with the comments that David's making in the sense that, and I've said this before, we've got a certain sense of responsibility, I think, to instill into these students while they're at learning institutions a sense of responsibility to engage in the electoral process. And if we do it when we have them in a captive audience, and if we can instill in them the fact that this is a sense of responsibility that they have, not just to themselves, but students that are coming behind them for years and years and years, that will be paying some of these fees, then maybe when they get out, they'll be better citizens. Maybe they'll go to the polls and vote more often. And so, this is a learning These are learning institutions, and I believe that we need to do everything we can to instill in them a sense of responsibility to go to the polls and vote for things that are important that affect them. So I don't know exactly whether we can come up with an arbitrary number either, as Bobby has said and as Fred has said, but I've been there. I know how this operates, and we can do better. They can do better. And I want them to know and understand, like David said, that this is something we're watching. We're watching these numbers, and we want this to be a meaningful process and not just a way to get around the rules and regulation. We want a meaningful input from students that we can use to ascertain whether they've had the opportunity to weigh in on it, and so we can make good, sound decisions. I received a number of letters. Some of them came through the agency. Some of them were written directly to me about the fact that they appreciated the fact that we did make an effort to take up for some of the students that are having a difficult time paying tuition fees. Thank you. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, as a suggestion for this committee's consideration, David, if we were to try to come up with language today, or it would change this rule, we would either need to slow this ruling down and not be able to consider it in January in terms of a 75% benchmark, and if that's the committee's desire, then that's fine, or move ahead with anything the committee wants to recommend in terms of modification or tweak to this rule. I guess we'd have to ask Bill whether it was material enough to repost or not, and then consider the other. What I would suggest, what I'm leading up to, is that we consider convening our stakeholders among the institutions, either with an existing committee if there's an appropriate one, or with a sort of a short-term task force if not, to ask the institutions to give us their feedback about what's a constructive way to go about accomplishing what you guys are describing. So those are kind of the two pathways, I think.
Now, assuming we maintain this, however, Fred, could we not amend it at the board meeting? Or do we either have to approve or reject it as presented, or
it could be amended at the board meeting, or staff could propose modifications to the rule and bring them to the board meeting based upon comments received. But as the chairman pointed out, if those comments result in changes that would be viewed as material modifications, the rule itself will need to be reposted and brought back to the board at its next meeting.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, I suggest that we move on with this particular item and then come back and address, I share your views on the, elections and, participation of the students' body, but I think we need to do that one at a time to get this off the plate.
Mr. Chairman, could we also...
Chair, I cannot hear. Munir, can you please speak up in the mic, please?
Sure. We're discussing making some addendum to the current rules that is proposed for the 75% limit on the student fees, and I'm suggesting, after Chairman Hillenfeld's comments, that we need to go ahead and get this thing out of the way before we make any more addition or changes to it. Otherwise, there will be a delay of another 30 days for the comment period.
Did you get that, Durga?
I don't think he can.
I don't think he can hear your mic for some reason.
So Mr. Chairman, we were talking about item number 3 there, the under no circumstances. Is it appropriate to make a motion to amend that now at this time? Because I think Chairman Heldenfeld's agreed with me. I would prefer, rather than saying under no circumstances shall, that we put that student fees should account for no more than 75% of the total. Should is permissive, and it would allow the board to then override it. It's not a shall. So I don't know, I'm looking at General Counsel, do we need to actually put that into the record now and make that part of our recommendation? Or is that something staff can take up and bring us an amended document to the January board meeting?
It is certainly something that staff can view as a directive from the board if there appears to be consensus on that point, and make the modification on its own. Or alternatively, if you'd care to make that motion, you can certainly do it at this point.
And would it also be germane, and you would not have to repost if we put another item in there saying that the institution's commitment to having maximum participation of student voting in the process shall be considered? Something to that effect?
I made a note to that effect already, that institutions are to use a methodology which encourages significant voter turnout. And I thought that that was something that could be added, subject to checking with some institutions to find out what type of cost would be entailed without having to repost the rule. So subject to that check, I believe that that can be done without reposting.
Okay. So if staff can take that under advisement and then bring us a revisions at our January board meeting, I'm okay with it the way it is.
If we find out that it would require, that change would require reposting, do you want us to leave it out, or do you want us to go ahead and put it in and repost?
Well, I think, we've certainly posted this item number 3, which is something we'd want to put into, or a revision. I would personally like to see a revision of 3 put into the rules as soon as possible. That doesn't mean after the January board meeting we couldn't repost.
I believe that one would be fine without reposting. I'm talking about the one about the
participation.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Yes, yeah. The voting. That
that
one might require reposting.
And if it does bring us this rule and repost, and then we can subsequently repost the other.
Okay. Make an amendment to
it. I would almost err on the side of being sure we give the institutions time to weigh in on that particular language about voter turnout.
Okay.
Help me understand, when is our January board meeting?
24th.
Okay, so we could repost the additional one tomorrow with the language that Bill has, and we'll have our 30-day period for comment.
The reason I'm turning around, looking around, is I'm looking for Sharon Josman, who does our postings with the Secretary of State. There's normally a 10 to 14-day lag time from the day of submission to the day of the posting actually begins.
So that's perfect. Tomorrow would be 31 days. 31 days.
Well, David, what I was referring to is more than just the usual comment period. I would, I'd like to see
we could bring together a group of people.
Yeah, gather a group of stakeholders.
So we're looking at April then instead of January. Is that what we're saying?
For that particular piece of it, I think it would be worthwhile to. For one thing, it might generate some best practice ideas.
Yeah, that's what
I really think that taking the time to do that and to bring the people in, I think this is a big thought process here. And so I would really want to make sure that going through that process, we had everybody at the table so that we understood the pros and cons and they understood what we were what the objectives were. I think it's worth taking that time to do it. And I think this changing it from shall to should, I think that's easy. I think we would all probably agree that that's fine. We get that done and then do the other part right, because I really think that's exciting and I think it's substantive.
I can agree to that.
I think I agree with that also. I think I would like
Everybody
to
in agreement? Okay.
Can I make one other brief comment? As we look at this, I think Fred or Bobby mentioned the word best practices, and I wish we could. Is there a way that we could look and maybe learn from some other states in terms of best practices and how they deal with this particular problem? Because it may be out there somewhere if we can just identify where it's at.
Is there another state better than Texas?
Well, that's no.
Not usually.
But no, what we can do is we can look and we can talk to some of the other facility planners in the other states to see what they do.
I would really like to see
They
how
have
other
something.
states make this decision and where they're at on it. I mean, I'm sure they're dealing with it to some extent or another, and if we could work that into to the process, I would like to see it. If we could do that, could we do that?
Yes, we can do
Doesn't have
that.
to be a
I don't
lot of
know.
work. I would just like to see
Yeah.
a general idea of what, maybe there's a model out there that's already solved the issue, this problem.
We can see what other states are doing, depending on what we can find.
So, Bill, let me just check with you then. Do we need a motion to make those adjustments, or are you just...
They could be comments to the staff. We did not post this as a voting item.
It's not anything that we're voting on today.
It is not, and for that reason, it's probably preferable to view it as a directive to the staff taking in all of the comments that have been made during the course of this discussion.
Okay, so could you just review those at this point so that we're clear?
Yeah, I think it's possible that while David's wording makes sense, it also raises the question that we may need to anticipate in any modifications of they should be no more than 75%, but if they are, then what? So I think that's a good idea because it gives staff time to kind of digest this and maybe bring an even better proposed modification back to the board in January.
Well, it'll also provide clarification to the institutions.
Yes, yeah.
We'll work on that.
Okay.
And I just Judy Schooling just advised me that our next posting deadline is next Monday, which is December 17th. And if any modifications were posted on December 17th, the 30 days would begin on December 28th. And so we would only have, if my math is correct, 26 days, 25 days before the next board meeting. So let us do some research. Let us check with the Secretary of State. We may not need a full 30-day posting, but we certainly want to give the institutions time to express their views. I know that personally I've been called twice by institutions' general counsels asking about the proposed changes, and I know Susan and Tom Keaton have worked and probably fielded some inquiries as well. So I think staff just needs some time to go back and take a look at this and decide just how significant the modifications are, what the institutions have to say about those proposed modifications, and decide whether or not we need to repost the rule. My question is, does board leadership wish to be advised of that so that it can make a decision before staff makes that decision on its own?
I would say the answer to that is yes.
Okay.
Any other discussion?
I'd like to make one quick comment, and I don't think we need to get too much on our plate all at one time, but a lot of these rules and policies were written a number of years ago when the state had a lot of money. Perhaps we don't have a lot of money anymore, and I'm sure that this is not the only policy or procedure that's in the agency that probably needs to be looked at. I would like to respectfully ask Chairman Heldenfels to perhaps think about setting up some means where we can do an internal review and comb our agency with perhaps some board members working with staff members trying to identify certain policies within the agencies that we think that need to be updated so we can be proactive instead of reactive. You may have already done this, Fred, without my knowledge.
Actually, we are, Dennis, but I'm glad you raised the question because this is exactly why I think it's so important for, my goal has always been for Texas higher education to lead the way for our institutions, but also for our own agency to adopt what I call lean continuous improvement, because that is ideas and solutions from the bottom up or from the team approach to giving the agency, giving an institution a change of culture, a culture to continually look for ways that improve quality and productivity and efficiency by relying on the innovation and the ideas of the folks who are, the boots on the ground, so to speak. And to that end, Munir's committee, Agency Operations, has a standing agenda item to hear from Arturo and our new director of Elaine, our new director of continuous improvement. I've had conversations with both Raymond and Arturo to look at things like our processes, like why do we even have preliminary authority? Why do we have this two-stage process to any degree program, for example? Well, the reason is because of the inefficiency on both sides of getting, analyzing, and sharing information and questions. Well, there's no reason with some effort and some stakeholder input that we can't, in my opinion, have a single process at a shorter time duration to make a decision and a recommendation to our committees and our boards, and just have an authority process instead of a preliminary authority process. I'm using that as an example of the kind of thing that our staff is taking on as a challenge.
Harold, can we get some IT guy to improve the sound, please? I could hear Bill really well, but I could not hear some of you clearly. Can we get IT to improve the sound?
So, Durga, can you hear me now? Hello, Durga.
Yeah.
Can you hear that? Are you able to hear if we're like speaking 3 inches from the microphone?
Yes, you mean a little more loudly than for Dr. Agrawal.
All right.
Please.
Durga, can you hear me now? This feels like a cell phone commercial, I remember.
No kidding. Okay. Is there any more discussion? If not, there is no action. You guys have your marching orders, and we'll look at the potential changes. Okay.
I wanted to let everybody know that for expedited approval, it has totaled up to $3.9 billion. However, $1.1 billion of that was for Hurricane Ike recovery projects. So, and that was a combination of a bunch of different projects that got pulled together.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Stewart, is everyone here now? Why don't y'all, let's go back to item 5D.
Good morning.
Good morning. If y'all would all please turn on your mics. And if you wouldn't mind, if everyone would introduce themselves, we'd appreciate it.
Yes, I'm Ann Stewart, Chancellor and President of Texas Women's University, and I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves.
I'm Monica Mendez-Gran. I'm the Associate Vice President for Student Life.
Please turn your mics on and pull them very close to you so that Dr. Agrawal can hear.
And I'm Brenda Floyd, and I'm Vice President for Finance and Administration.
I'm Harold Johnson. I'm the Associate Vice President for Facilities Management and Construction. Can you hear this? No. Oh.
It's on.
It's on.
It's a little red light's on.
What about now?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, well, welcome. The floor is yours.
Well, this is a committee that we love to come in front of. We have been active in facilities for a decade and more and have done some wonderful things at Texas Women's University along with your approval and with your applause, we might say. So we're hoping that that continues for us. I'm going to make a few oversight remarks. As I've just said, we have been focused on facilities and improving our plant for the last 13 years, always with the need of academics and what do we need to do to serve our students and faculty. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Our enrollment over the last decade has grown 85%. And those of you who are in business, you know that those are numbers that you would like to have. So we are very proud of our enrollment plan. We're a complicated and complex university. As many people would say that, but we're located in 3 sites: Houston with our Institute for Health Sciences, Dallas with another Institute of Health Sciences, and Denton, which is the mother campus. So with those 3 locations, it makes for challenges. Also, we're challenged by the fact that we are about 40% graduate school enrollment and 60% undergraduate enrollment. And so that is a mix that is not usual in most universities. Many of those graduate degrees are master's degrees because they are completion degrees in the disciplines that we offer. We are a workforce university. We have about a large contingency of our students are in the health professions, given the 2 health institutes that we have and also the Denton campus. So that means that nursing and OT and PT and nutrition and stroke prevention and hospital administration, dental hygiene, all of those are important to our curricula, but they also are important to the citizens of Texas because our graduates stay here, they come back into the populations, and they serve those of us who are going to need those things. In addition, we are a very diverse campus. About 45% of our population is a minority population, so the faces of the students at Texas University, Women's University, are the faces of the citizens of Texas. We understand the relationship between how our campus functions and looks and the perception of quality. You know, when I was going to school, it really didn't matter whether the chairs matched or whether the mimeograph machine worked, but not today. Just go out and look at those high schools in your community and you realize that they are the environments in which students are being taught. If they have been going to community colleges, they look like 4-year colleges. They are sophisticated and gorgeous in their facilities and their attributes. And so we know that in order to attract the best and the brightest, which we intend to do and which we do, we have to have a classroom and a campus that says that we are a #1 quality institution. We're very proud of that, and we're very proud of the fact that our classrooms are seamless laboratories into the workplace. If you're a nurse, you're going to have been trained and learned in an environment that is identical to the environment that you're going to walk in, whether it's Baylor or whether it's UT Southwestern or whether it's any of those institutions, Methodist or whatever. So we spend a lot of time in knowing what the industry is requiring, what it is doing, upgrading, and making those things right for our students. We're also very aware that all of you have dashboards about space usage and lab usage and all of that. So we are constantly analyzing how many students are we going to have coming, how many students are we serving, and we very much work on a just-in-time process so that we don't overbuild, so that we have space that is just sitting there waiting for success to happen, but that we can have, and that's hard to do, as those of you in business know, but at least it's our goal to be ready when we need it, but not to be ready too much ahead of the curve. You've wanted to know, or you have talked sometimes about public-private partnerships. We're extremely proud of the one that we had in Houston. I think you're going to see a slide of the institute there that we built. That was a $40 million facility, and that was at no cost to the state at all. We invited the coordinating board and others to come, particularly the chairman of Higher Education Finance, to come to our opening ceremony, and we presented them with the keys to the building and then asked them to help us keep it up for the next couple of 3 or 4 or 5 decades. But we were able to do that through a wonderful partnership with Methodist Hospital. And as most of you know, public-private partnerships are only successful if they're win-wins for both entities. In this situation, it was exactly that. Methodist, we had an old facility, and it was run down, but it was on a priceless piece of property, particularly if you were Methodist Hospital, because it was contingent to it. So and they had a parking lot over several blocks, which wasn't as important to them, but it was marvelous to us because it's the gateway to the southern entry to the medical center. So we swapped land. They gave us $30 million. They built us a parking garage. We raised the rest of it, and we did that at no cost to the state, but at a wonderful example of how a win-win can be constructed. We then came up to Dallas. Didn't quite have the same ability to do because we didn't have someone that needed so much what we had, and we wanted so much what they had. But we did build a beautiful T. Boone Pickens Institute for Health Sciences in Dallas. It also is an example of how you can raise a great deal of community money for facilities that are going to pay back. And it's not hard to tell a donor what this is going to mean to a community when you're educating nurses and OTs and PTs and doing that kind of work. So we are extremely proud of our institution. We're extremely proud of our facilities. These are the people who make it happen. They are the ones who know the numbers. They are the ones who know our vision for the future. And that's what we want to tell you a little bit about today, and also answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, with that said, thank you, Dr. Stewart. Every planning process we go through at TWU is sort of breaking out as you see the one broken out here in the presentation.
I'm sorry, Harold. Could you speak into the microphone a little more?
Draw that closer to you.
Yeah, we always assess where we are, where we were, where we are, and where we're going. This presentation does the same thing. So just briefly, a little bit of a recap to build on what Dr. Stewart said. In 2001, Texas Women's University constructed a $19.5 million energy performance contract, which at that time was the largest energy performance contract in the state of Texas. Quite an accomplishment for an institution our size. About $2.5 million in a million tons of CO2 saved, and well over $20 million of funding and energy saved. At that time, we knew we had some deficient facilities, many. We knew we had to come up with a strategy to repair those facilities. So we looked at deferred maintenance. We did some strategic planning, and we redid all of our design and construction specifications. We incorporated something we were working on at the time that we called enterprise integration strategies, which leads us to smart buildings, is what we like to call them. And all of our specs incorporated energy performance standards, earth-friendly environments. We did not have money at the time to do the LEEDs process, so we took it a step further, and everything we did operationally or construction-wise incorporated all of those strategies, plus all the strategies we knew, my staff and I, from our experience that would help us achieve savings. So we targeted buildings, we did fire code restorations, we did building envelopes, we did all kinds of things to improve this environmental quality for our students and the environment. Now, with that said, we did a few projects also during that time frame, and we built an apartment-style housing complex. You should see that in your brochures. It's not on the slide here. The Arts and Science building was completely gutted and renovated during that time frame. We built demoed the old and constructed a new Red Bud Theater in one of the buildings we had existing, because it was very small. We didn't need a complete building to do that. We constructed a soccer field. We renovated old main building, which was constructed in 1901's the oldest building on our campus, and we did that with to keep it from sliding off its foundation. Where we are, we fully implemented the enterprise integration system. Is incorporated in all our specifications. We share that with other institutions around the state of Texas of how we accomplish those things. It provides us a tremendous amount of flexibility in operation, where we continue the energy savings, and every building we have is sustainable throughout the future. We've done about 65% of the roofs on the campus have been replaced to, again, that building envelope concept. And we've constructed our first LEED building, which was a fitness and rec center, and that was the first public university fitness and rec center constructed under LEED. It's LEED Silver. As you can see on the existing slide, these are some of the projects, just a few selections from the era of where we are now. And as you can see, Dr. Stewart mentioned the Houston project. That's in the upper left-hand corner. That's a very good shot of with the medical center and the towers in the background. That's a 200,000 square foot facility for about $40 million with no cost to the state. Also, the one to the right is the Ann Stewart Science Complex.
Pay particular attention to that.
we already decided it's the most attractive of all these buildings.
Thank you so much.
And that's the Ann Stewart Science Complex, and it's quite a handsome building. It's very functional. The faculty loves it. We involve faculty in everything we do when we're planning buildings. We actually have a person that is assigned to work with us and sit in all of our construction meetings, and then go back and disseminate information to the faculty.
And Harold, I'm going to take a moment. You know, one of the things that we also do is we understand what we have to build for what the state needs. STEM courses, STEM direction. You can't pick up a newspaper, you can't hear the legislature. You know that we have to do more in the science and the technology areas. So when you see that we have decided to put funds, we have more requests than we have money, which is, you understand. So therefore, we put them where we think we're going to get the best return on the investment for the student, and that would be true of a science complex for us.
And of course, in the lower right-hand corner, you see that fitness and rec center. We like night shots, day shots. So it's a very, very nice complex. Students love it. It's very heavily utilized. I even use it on occasion, not enough. But and then on the right-hand, lower right-hand corner, you see the TWU's, T. Boone Pickens Institute of Health Sciences in Dallas. That building, we're in the process. We just finished the garage, a 600-space parking garage that's constructed in conjunction with this building. That building has been submitted for LEED Gold certification, and we don't see any reason why we won't achieve that. So we're moving forward. We're building very, very nice buildings. We're working with the public to get these accomplished. And next, we'll talk, let Dr. Brenda Floyd talk a little bit about our process of how we plan.
Yes. Every time, well, really and truly on an ongoing basis, we are undergoing processes for determining what our new and renovated facility needs might be. We always begin those processes with needs assessments identified by our academic programs and our departments. We also consider growth for a few years out to 15 years out. We engage our campus constituents. We use our facility audits, and we consider operational maintenance requirements as we go through the process of campus, what we call campus visioning for the future of facilities. We hold visioning forums that include faculty, staff, and students. We do that at all 3 campuses, and that's an ongoing process for us now, so that we can hear from our faculty, staff, and students what the future means to them or what it might need to them. Those ideas are then compiled by facilities management and evaluated by the Chancellor's Cabinet. Ultimately, feasibility studies are commissioned as necessary, and the priorities are established, and these priorities are then taken to our Board of Regents for consideration before going any further in accomplishing these renovation projects or construction projects. We then provide conceptual maps for our Board of Regents and as a part of this final process. And I'm going to turn it back over to Harold Johnson, and he'll show you a little bit about our current visioning process.
Okay, with that said, what we have is a campus development map as we see it, listening to all of our clients' needs and trying to assimilate those needs into the various facilities and provide the infrastructure for those facilities as well.
Only in Denton.
In Denton only, yes. This map basically, from the lower quadrant, quadrant A, it goes counterclockwise is the way I'll be speaking to it. As you can see, the facility in red, just above the A, is a proposed garage structure. Parking has been a very, very tough problem on campus. So we're looking to eliminate some of those problems. So a parking structure is proposed, just like the one we have in Dallas, which has turned out so very wonderful. It's about 600 spaces. But in the process of building this parking structure, as you can see, it's over a parking lot. We'll displace about 150 spaces. So we propose, up in the upper right-hand corner, you see 1A, we propose a temporary lot to just handle that situation during the construction of the parking structures. That will eliminate some of the parking as we go. The blue buildings that stand out very well are structures that we have completed. The one at the top, the highest up on the map, is the recreation center. The small blue one that has a gray shade underneath it is the theater, Redbud Theater, and the blue at the lower end is the Anstor Science Complex, and we completed those projects just recently. What we propose is to construct also in Quadrant a science and technology building, which is the lowest part of the map there, the red building that's shown. That's just down the street from the old main building. It's across the street from the Anstor Science Building, and it's adjacent to the Human Development Building. All of those structures help us to form a science complex, and that's what we've been trying to establish over the years. We've established an academic concourse, which is basically everything to the west of Bell Street, and we have established a housing concourse, and now we're trying to further delineate by establishing these academic concourses. That was one of the reasons we chose that location for a new parking structure, because it's immediately across the street from all of the academic buildings, or most of the academic buildings, I should say, so which provides accessibility for students and everything. With that said, over in Section B, we're looking at housing. We need, we're about 300 or 400 beds short on housing. Our student life people have had to do several things to accommodate our students, and therefore we need to logically be looking at housing units. So with that said, we proposed this area with the green space over on Section B side, which would accommodate housing. As you can see, we also show another parking garage over in that area. Part of that scenario is to construct a new student recreation center in the future. And we have two locations shown on there for a student recreation center, because we want the design to play out and actually tell which location is best for the campus. But those projects, and you can see some of the infrastructure we've drawn in to accommodate those projects, as well as a satellite utility plant, which would be needed for that east side of campus to augment our main power plant on the west side, which is far north on the west side. The lines just tend to get smaller and smaller as you go out from the central plant, so therefore we need more chill water and heating on that side of the campus. So the satellite plan is included as well. Then we turn our attention to Quadrant C, and as you can see, we address some of the athletic issues over there. We have some athletic locker rooms drawn in. We have an existing restroom over at the softball field that is not accessible. We have to make those facilities accessible, create some concession stands, and integrate the softball, the tennis, and the soccer field with those facilities, so as not to replicate those facilities for each area. We also built are showing a jogging trail through the woods. That's a heavily wooded area. It's just south of the University House. And we think we can make that work and maintain the existing ropes course that's out there. And so that makes the faculty happy. And then for a future, way out in the future, 10, 15 years from now, we may need some additional housing. Just below the C is where you see some blocks drawn in for another 400 to 800 housing units and another parking garage. This is basically our concept of where we need to go. The next slide shows those projects, and the first few projects under Phase 1 are the projects we're currently moving into, along with some of the projects we think we need to accomplish within the first 5 years of this plan. So the chiller capacity upgrade, fire code mandate, satellite plan is not being done now, but those first two are actually being done now. We're adding another chiller to our central plant, a third chiller. And driveway and infrastructure improvements, we're trying to do that throughout the campus. We've done other infrastructure improvements. I think the last time we were here to present the rec center, I talked to the board about drainage infrastructure improvements that we were doing. We've completed those, and now we're moving into the driveways and roadways, and we're more pedestrian-friendly campus now. We've always been, but now we have more bicycles. We've bought new bicycle racks, repair stations and things of that nature. So it's becoming a more pedestrian-friendly campus, even more than it was. The Old Main roadway improvement is the road that runs down south of Old Main. It's in deplorable condition. There are a lot of ADA parking issues along that roadway. The ground is heaved and so on and so forth, so we're also in the process of doing that. We'd like to get that paving job done this summer, if possible. And then the proposed garages, student housing, and student union projects, which according to all of our clients, we need to try to accomplish those somewhere in the next 5 years or so. And after that, Phase 2 are the longer range projects out for the next 10 years maybe. Old Main still needs renovation. We stopped it from sliding off its foundation at about $4.2 million. And now we need to renovate the interior. It's a wonderful building. We want to maintain that historic ambience and character of the building, but we also have to meet all code requirements. And that would be at the top of our list for sure to get that done, along with the other buildings that you can see listed there. That's it for me. Any questions?
That was a wonderful presentation, and Dr. Stewart, I'd like to commend you and your staff on the vision and leadership. I understand from Dr. Gardner that maybe you're going to be leaving the institution. Is that correct?
I've announced that I'm with the Regents that I'm leaving. I'm going to stay for a year. We have some projects to do, and I want them to give me lots of parties and lots of gifts. So I don't want to rush
I'm sure
away.
they're well deserved.
So we have a lot of work to do, and a lot of work to do in this, but this is a great team. We're very proud of our facilities, and we care a lot about them. So we hope that you can come see us. We have beautiful campuses, whether they're Houston, Dallas, or Denton.
Very good. Members?
Mr. Chairman, I had a couple of questions, but I also want to echo your comments, Dr. Stewart. Congratulations on the accomplishments of your tenure. That 85% enrollment increase is certainly an impressive accomplishment, but not by any means the only one.
Thank you.
So thank you for your service. One of the things I noted on the first slide was that in your strategy, your policy to move towards energy efficiency and environmental neutrality, you reference here $22.4 million in savings. And this is kind of an open question for the whole panel, but there's a very current debate in the construction industry right now on the value of LEED certification, and although design certainly is continuing to move in a green direction. So I'm very interested in how you measured those savings and what you estimate their continuing return will be.
Those were the savings that were measured as a part of the energy performance contract as performed by the energy contractor. Our savings, our university savings were also in those totals. So everything they metered reflected the savings that my operational staff were implementing at the same time. So it was sort of a joint savings scenario. We continue, we no longer have the performance contract. Of course, all the attributes of it are still there. Our way of measuring is I had something in there about open protocol. I didn't really talk about it. But we started that in Houston. We tried to do it with the energy performance contract, but it was a little bit late for that. And open protocol allows us to drill down into all the control systems, into the mechanical devices, the VFDs, the air handlers, everything, and make sure that we can operate those controls the way we want. They don't operate the way the manufacturer have spec'd them out for every single different building that they install those in, because no building is the same. So we use Utilivisor, which is a kind of a utility overlay program. We can go out and actually run real-time scenarios based on the feedback we're getting, and one of our techs can sit there and say, well, if we change this parameter, what would that do to us? And in real time, it tells them give them feedback as to what that would do. It may be a good thing, it maybe not. It'll make a suggestion as to what they could do to improve that efficiency, and then they just implement it. So we're continuing to do those kind of processes, come up with those kind of platforms. That's all a part of our energy strategy, what I refer to as the enterprise integration system. We actually have, during construction, during design, we have a vendor that we hire to go out and measure these devices at the manufacturers before they're put in. And in the manufacturers, in the contracts with the subs, we stipulate that if they choose to put devices in that don't meet our criteria, they can do that. We're not going to tie them down to just the few devices that we're telling them about. But if they choose to do that, then the difference in that cost will be reflected on them through making the corrections to get it to the level of savings that we have specified. And we've had only one or two instances where the manufacturers didn't do that. You find these conflicts, I'll call them, in protocols, in J boxes, and sometimes it's really drilling down, what we call drilling down into the system. So the front end may be open and provide everything, but once you test a VFD or something like that, there may be some anomaly in there that keeps it from performing as specified.
So do you do, on any new construction, do you do an energy performance audit, or only audit those alternative systems that are used, as you said, by?
We're auditing the systems that are in that particular construction process, each and every time. That's what we do.
For the whole project?
Yes, yes. We developed that in Houston. Unfortunately, we were about halfway through the project when I came up with that bright idea, so we scurried around, made some changes, and not all the devices in that building have the open protocol, but most of them do. All the way down to the elevators with ThyssenKrupp, and as you all know, they're not the easiest people to deal with. So they had to actually write a program to coordinate with our open protocol, motion and something in motion, logic in motion or something, was the programmer for the controllers. And so they had to write a program which they wanted to charge us for $5,000 at first. And I said, fine, as long as it belongs to the university. And then they thought about it for a while. They said, no, this would be something we can use in the future. I thought so. So they gave it to us free. So
the $22.4 million was the savings from this initial 2001 to 2006?
Plus some of our operational savings, yes.
And that included the EPC contractors' share of the savings, but during the current 5-year period, you're still experiencing savings of that magnitude?
We're yes.
About $4.5 million a year?
Yeah. We've been very fortunate in utility rate negotiations. Houston, Dallas, and Denton. We've been very fortunate with the vendors we work with, just having the university's best interests at heart. And to the point where one of our architects, a pretty good-sized architect firm, told us after we finished the Dallas project that he had never worked with a team like mine. He said, you all from the chancellor all the way through your team really are concerned about the university. I said, well, isn't everybody? That's our job. So I thought that was a very nice comment for him to make, and we do take it seriously.
Well, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Was part of your question whether all buildings should be seeking LEED certification?
Well, that was more of a comment. During the recession, a good many owners, developers, et cetera, have questioned the cost of LEED certification.
So do we.
And
I think that is a healthy discussion to have. You know, it has taken on a life of its own. There's a wonderful freedom when you've announced that you're going to retire. You can make all of these statements that you would never think of making in front of you 2 years ago. But I would encourage you to think about that, because it becomes now, or I have observed, that you think of it as something that you must have because everyone else has it, or that you're going to want it at the coordinating board or this group. And I think that there could be a very healthy sense. We're all looking at money, and the money is shrinking, and we're having to do things more efficiently all the time. Is this, and I haven't even talked to these guys, but I mean, it has crossed my mind of, is this a goal that every single building needs to seek and must seek, and at what cost? I think you'd be well served to have that conversation.
Yeah. Thank you for that comment.
David?
So this is an excellent presentation, and I agree with you. The empowerment of announcing your retirement is I did it a couple decades ago. It was time uncertain, but I would recommend we all do that, because the motto that I live by is question everything. I think we do need to question everything, and you all to be commended. Now, I didn't know in the presentation, what is your current enrollment? How many students do you have?
We're about 15,000.
15,000 between all three
No,
campuses?
13,000. Oh, 15,000. It just grows so quickly I can't keep up.
And 10 years from now, where do you want to be?
Well, we talk about that a lot. And I'm not going to give you a number, because it's a complicated, if you're going to look at this push-pull and try to be lean, I don't know what's going to happen in healthcare. If we can't get enough nurses, I just talked to someone, we're proliferating schools of nursing, colleges of nursing in this state. You can't get enough faculty to teach the students who want to take nursing right now. So we could overbuild and therefore not have faculty who can produce the quality that we need. And so I don't know that's our premier program, if you want to talk about the LEED program that we are known for. If we drop that, I'm not sure where the enrollment goes, but we have all kinds of models that we pursue. We talk about this constantly because it affects how many faculty we're going to hire, in what kinds of areas are we going to hire them, and what do we have to pay them, because as you know, they all differentials. And then what kind of buildings do we need in this master plan that we're talking about today? So the coordinating board will give us a number. We'll have a debate about that. We'll be talking about who's coming. We're about 70% of our population is in healthcare or education. Now, those are bread and butter students for the state of Texas because they go right into the school systems and teach K through 12 and then come back and maybe enter a university, or they are in the OTs, PTs, and nursing areas. But we need to watch the market. And what are these healthcare systems that are coming down from D.C. and into our state? So a long answer, but we better be smart. We better not overbuild. We better be smart. We better think ahead, and we need to know exactly what our markets need, since so much of our institution is not about philosophy and drawing or painting. It's about workforce jobs. So it's a complicated model to get you an answer.
Well, and I noticed you have a very unique campus, and to be able to have the high achievement that you have,
yes,
and the loyalty of the students without having a football stadium. I mean, you're to be commended for that.
Well, we're undefeated in football. You know?
I noticed that. I noticed that. Yeah. And it's hard to get you on the schedule, too. I mean, there's a long waiting list. But honestly, I think you made some remarks there that I'd like to really follow up on. Online learning, distance learning seems to be a huge component, especially now in the nursing field.
Yes.
What's your strategy with the way you construct your buildings to be able to meet that need? And where are you going to be 10 years from now in that? Maybe even next year. How about that?
Well, we're going to be larger. There's no doubt about that. We're about 40% of our students now take an online course. Many of them, as you all know these stories, you know, they sit in the residence halls and take the online course there. My father would have killed me if I had stayed in the residence hall and taken an online course, but it's a different day, it's a different age. We do have some online degrees only, 9 in fact, where they never touch bricks and mortar, and we probably will be doing more of that. This phenomenon of delivering education is going to be so different 10 years from now that any one of us sitting in one of these seats we cannot, I don't think, predict the future. What is going to happen with MOOCs? What's going to happen with this free courses that they are offering? I don't think we're going to see this semester system survive. I talk to my group all the time. We're going to see a 12-month university. We're going to do away with semesters. We're going to offer courses in 1-month units, 4-month units, 6-month units, whatever it takes. We're going to do online. We're going to do offline. We're going to do blended. But it's not going to be what I went to school and valued, and it's not going to be even what you know. What is important to all of us is quality, and how we're going to judge that quality if we lose control of our degree credit program. And that's the challenge in this whole thing, because there are going to be so many other ways to get courses offered to you, and students want to put together a bushel basket of offerings and have that somehow turn into a degree from somewhere. And we've got to work out how we do that, because if you say you're not going to take any of those courses, our enrollment will be 6,000, not 15,000. So flexibility, creativity, I think is one of the most exciting things that anyone could be in. If you want a challenging field, it's higher education for the next decade. How we're going to put the cost and the efficiencies, the delivery and the quality together. But I don't know the answer. I just know that it's huge, exciting, and good minds need to start working on it quickly.
Thank you.
Brett, I'm not sure one more year is going to be enough, Dr. Stewart. I think you're just getting started, it sounds like.
Well, no.
We would invite you, depending on your schedule, you may want to stay around for our next committee's discussion about DNP and the report on such.
Yes. Thank you. Well, come see us.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay. Let's see, we're back on F. Is that correct? All right. Discussion relating to this is agenda item 5F. Discussion relating to the enrollment analysis concerning reasons for the slower enrollment growth rate. Susan Brown?
And I'm going to try to get through this. So, yeah, David's going to chime in because we've gone over it, so he's going to chime in if I start going away. Put it closer. Okay, is that better? Yeah, sorry, I can't talk very loud. A lot of people are very happy about that, including my sons. We have started looking at why we had the enrollment slow down. We don't have all the answers. We have a lot of indications, and we have a lot of different information, and we wanted to present it to you at this time. Next slide. First thing we're going to talk about is enrollment. A lot of people think about enrollment as being just getting new students in. It's a lot of different things. It's not only, you have dual credit, you have new students coming in, those first-time entering students, you have persistence rates, students continuing. Then you have those stop-outs, those students who left and then came back into the system. So I wanted to make sure that everybody understands we're talking about the whole group of students. We're going to look at where was the decline, because it wasn't consistent across the state. And then what are some of the contributing factors? And then the last thing we're going to talk about are some of the population projections that we've just gotten from the Texas State Data Center. Okay. Preliminary head count showed an increase of 12,000. If you look at it now, without the career colleges, we would have actually had a decrease of 12,000. So the career colleges, we've gotten those numbers. Overall, we have an increase of just 9,500. So very much slower. It was 46 or 47,000 between fall 10 and fall 11. That is a huge slowdown in the amount of growth. Unlike other states, however, a lot of other states have had actual declines in enrollment. Next slide. The white population was the one that actually declined the most, and Hispanic went up and African American went up, just not at the rates that we need them to. So this is kind of like where we've seen the decline. Next slide. Given these numbers, we need 90,000 additional students to reach our goal of 2015. Excuse me. For public and private independent, and the next thing you're going to see, we're going to talk about are the preliminary or the enrollment forecast. And if the institutions do the historical trend and we look at our enrollment forecast with the new population projections, we are expecting the public and private institutions to enroll about 60,000 additional students by 2015. So then if the career colleges continue to enroll students, we still can reach our target of 630,000 additional students.
Susan, not to split hairs, but that figure on that graph of 540 is, we had originally estimated a net increase of 12,000. Now it's 9,500. So I think we're actually, it's marginal, but I think we're 2,500 higher than that figure, aren't we?
And it could be, we're rounding. We're doing the rounding because even though we have better numbers than we had for preliminary, they're still not all certified yet.
Oh, you're still waiting on.
So we still have some institutions that have not certified their enrollment numbers yet.
So the bottom line is we need a net 30,000 more students enrolled each of the next 3 years, based on the best numbers we've got right now.
Right.
What's the normal timeline for certification?
Usually we have the universities have all certified, so the community colleges run a little bit behind that. So we will hope to have all the community colleges certified by early to mid-January. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But all the universities and the health science centers have already certified.
And let me add in that after discussion with Mr. Heldenfels, that one thing we have under review with the lean process is looking at the data submission certification process to see if there's anything we can do on both ends to speed up that process. It's better than it was a few years ago, but still has room for improvement. So we've seen some promising elements coming out of that review already. So we're hopeful for next year.
Good. One of the things, I will say, one of the things that slows down the process is the coordinating board. We have put in additional edit checks where we check between different reports that come to us to verify the accuracy of the data. So we think we're getting more accurate data. It is slowing down the process a little bit as they have one report that's error-free, but it doesn't match a second report that it should be matching. And so as we add more of those type of edit checks to make sure that our accuracy is higher, it tends to slow down the process of getting them to certify. Because we want to make sure that no matter where we pull the data from, we're getting the same numbers. We're getting all that data correct.
And I think we're all for improved accuracy, but as we improve accuracy, then we need to revisit how we speed the process up. And let's not ever let the perfect get in the way of the possible.
And we're working on that and trying to get. Part of it was we had a huge change in our reporting system last year, and there are some institutions who, in working with their vendors, don't quite have all the bugs worked out of that, shall we say?
Understand.
Okay, next slide. This shows all the public and independent colleges around the state. Upper Rio Grande and the Gulf Coast were the only two regions that had an overall increase in enrollment at all. You can see South Texas had the largest decrease in enrollment. Next slide. Oh, actually, I should have said High Plains also had an increase. They increased 43 students. So. This shows the community college, and we're going to focus on the community colleges in this for a couple of different reasons. Number one, they had the largest decrease. They decreased by 21,000 students. But also because they had, because they are more closely tied to the workforce. And we think that has a lot to do with this. Next. Maybe next slide. The next slide we just talks about some of the areas, contributing factors that we looked at. We looked at unemployment rate changes, state and federal policies that have changed, dual credit enrollment, high school seniors going on to college, the students going on, higher education graduates, persistence, some of the things that we talked about, increases in tuition and fees, and then the population estimates. Next slide. This shows the unemployment rate. So between October of 2011 and October of 2012, unemployment in Texas dropped from 7.9% to 6.6%. If you look at the graph on the right-hand side, you can tell the university line, the bottom line, continues to go up, whereas the community college line goes down. And that's what I'm talking about. The community colleges are more closely tied to the workforce. And so you'll see that throughout this presentation. Okay, next slide. Okay, we're having some issues here. The next slide, since y'all have it in front of you, I'm going to just keep going. There we go. Next slide shows the South Texas region, since they're the region that had the largest decline in enrollment. And I know it's hard to see, but those are all the MSAs for the region, and overall they went down. But it accounted for, all that decline accounted for almost 30,000 additional people employed. Now, we don't know that those are students or those were students. That is data that we won't get until June of this coming year, because the fourth quarter data from the UI wage record it has a 6-month delay before we get it. So that is one of the things we're looking at. You can also look at their enrollment. They had a huge drop in their community college enrollment, and their university enrollment even flattened out. Didn't completely go down, but it did flatten out.
Susan, do you think, did the oil patch have any impact?
I'm sure
on
the
that?
oil patch did have. A lot of what we're hearing from the institutions and their newspaper articles about, students coming out of high school getting jobs making, $50,000, $60,000 a year, it's really hard for them to justify going to, to a community college and that sort of thing, or to college. Okay. So we do believe that has a big part of it. Like I said, we won't get the UI wage data that we need to make that direct linkage. These are all indications. As the oil patch, as things improve in the economy. We also have a lot of those students who had stopped out, so they had come back in when the economy was bad. They came back into higher ed, who are not here. So we're thinking they either got the training they need, the economy's picking up, they're going back into the workforce.
Yeah,
not necessarily a bad
There have also
thing.
been some changes in the organization in Brownsville, the Texas Southmost and UT Brownsville, which we think have temporarily disrupted the enrollment increases in that particular town, along with the oil patch.
Sure. During our site visit at the San Jacinto College in Houston, I think we were at one of the skills center, and the instructor was telling us that these kids will enroll, but within 4 or 5 months they're out of there. The job offers are so high and so much in demand, they just can't keep them in.
It's.
Wait.
You need.
You're up, Dennis.
I'm sorry. Muneer's right. They're being drawn out of the classes into the workforce before they even complete their.
And one of the things,
because of the high demands.
And one of the things that we have seen are community colleges starting, and this started back last spring, community colleges starting to offer what we call flex entry courses, short courses, 5-week, 6-week courses, to try to help students at least complete a course before they move out to the workforce and get them some type of training. We've seen that increase. We don't have the numbers for this fall. We collect those at the end of the semester, so we won't get them till next spring. But those, with the increase in flex entry, that might account for some of the community college drop-off in enrollment, because those students are taking those little short courses, so they weren't there on the census date. So we'll be able to tell a little bit more about that once we get the spring data coming in.
I think Mr. Lalani's point's really very on point here, though, because when the economy is beginning to improve, those students who went there to have opportunities, the opportunity arises quickly, and they can be taken before they complete. There are also those students who during difficult times will return to take perhaps a course just to get that next skill they need. And so that's why we think the community colleges are really important to growing the economy, but also why they're most likely to see enrollment changes during more prosperous times.
I would like to make a quick comment. What we want to encourage, I think, and work with community colleges is developing more multiple entry and more multiple exits in and out of the institutions with certain finite stopping places where they can finish a certain amount of education, receive a certificate, go in the workforce, work a while, and then enter back into the community college system for additional training and then exit back out. So what we're seeing is the flexibility of some of these courses being structured such that, as I said, there's multiple entries and multiple exits.
And I believe Max Group is working on what they call stackable programs where they can do just that.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with this because our goal is to align our curriculum with the workforce demands and to be able to move and quickly and change directions as those workforce demands change.
Correct.
Another aspect of that is the recently announced at the governor's press conference in South Texas. It's a TSTC Harlingen program, which is very concentrated, very short period of time, so you can actually get through the entire program in a very short period of time rather than stretching out over a full year or year and a half.
Okay, this shows the Upper Rio Grande because that was the one of the areas of the state that actually grew. And Harold's happy. El Paso grew because the unemployment. Okay, Dr. Agarwal is talking to somebody else.
Hold
apparently.
on just a second, Susan. Durga? Must be.
Okay. If I might insert at this point, one reason Susan is showing two particular regions is it shows how the same factors don't play out the same in every region. So you'll see here that while the unemployment rate is going down in both regions, in one region the enrollment is going up and in one region it's going down. And this is similar to what we found a decade ago when these factors didn't play out, but for the last 6 years or so, because the economy was so bad throughout the state, you saw the similar effect. But now we're beginning to go back to a time where one factor doesn't explain everything. And so this illustrates that, I think, very well.
Okay, next slide. One of the things that we found was that changes to the Pell Grant have played a big part of what we're seeing in some of the institutions. Satisfactory progress. The students used to be able to be on scholastic probation for up to 3 semesters before they no longer received a Pell Grant. They reduced that to 1 semester. We talked to some of the institutions that had lost a lot of students, and out of about 5 or 6 that had had specific information on that, they had combined lost about 3,000 students because of they felt changes in the Pell Grant. So that's a big number for just a few of institutions. They've also had change instead of just a handful of students or a sampling of students that had to go through the verification process with the IRS, they now verify all of the things through the IRS nationwide. So that's added to a slowdown, a delay of 6 weeks or so, which means the students aren't getting their Pell Grant money, which means they have a hard time enrolling. So we've heard from institutions that that's another issue that they've been having to face. Also for Pell Grants for summer 2012, in 2011, for that summer, Pell Grants were allowed. And so we saw kind of an uptick in the number of students who enrolled from the summer into the fall semester. And now then they changed the rules for summer 12 to where you could not receive a Pell Grant in summer 12. So we don't know how much that actually affected students not enrolling. So those are just some of the changes, and those are all made at the federal level.
Do we have any statistics on students that had been on probation for 3 semesters as to their success ratio?
We don't know when a student is put on probation,
okay.
So we don't have that.
What would you say, Commissioner?
But you're estimating that just the Pell Grant rules changes created a net loss of 3,000 students statewide?
Well, those are numbers that we got from probably about 5 or 6 institutions.
For your institutions?
No, those were community colleges.
From 5 or 6, so.
Right, and now those were the ones with the biggest loss. And part of the problem, it's kind of hard to find out because satisfactory progress, the changes were phased in over time, this being the last semester that they had to have it phased in by. So institutions implemented that policy change at different points. So the ones that took the hit this time may have been those that waited till the very last minute to make that change. So
Did you cover item number 2, the 150% of time?
No, that was and it's 150% of time. They used to be able to use Pell Grant for a larger number of semesters, so they've cut that back to, I believe it's 10 semesters or something like that, 12 semesters. So they've cut back the number of semesters you can use a Pell Grant, and that's all part of the satisfactory. They put a lot of different factors in, so they didn't cut the amount of Pell Grant, but they made changes to reduce the number of students in it. We still hear from just a handful of institutions about bacterial meningitis being an issue, you know, students having to have that bacterial meningitis vaccine. We're not hearing from nearly as many students, and I will say that they were all very complimentary of the fact that we now have, there was a form on our website, and they didn't have to go through the DHS process for a form for a waiver. And so we did hear from a lot of them that was a...
How many students used that waiver?
I believe it was around 10,000, 11,000 that used our waiver, is my understanding. We did a survey, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but we can get those.
Do we know what type of students those were? I mean, are those recent high school graduates? Are they adults reentering the educational system?
I don't know. I can get that information.
We debated quite a bit about that and whether it was really what type of student would want to opt out.
And I don't know. I believe that was one of the questions on the survey, but I don't have those results in front of me. I can get that for you.
I would imagine that we're probably going to be asked about that by the policymakers now that they're back in session, because they specifically did not want to make it easy to opt out.
We conducted that survey specifically at their request, and so that has been provided to them. We can get you the details on it.
Yeah, I just don't have it with me. Next slide. This is dual credit. Statewide dual credit is up about 3,900. If you look in the Upper Rio Grande, it's up 2,100 in the Upper Rio Grande alone, which, if you remember on the previous slide, community college enrollment was only up 1,700. So all of their increase came from dual credit students. So I know there's been a big push there, and they do a really good job with that. Next thing. Next thing we're going to talk about is the high school. Usually we present you with information on high school graduates going into college. We do not have the high school graduate file. We won't get that from TEA until early March. So what we've done is we've gone back and we've looked at the number of seniors who historically go on to higher ed the following fall. And one of the things we found is that after 4 or 5 years of the number of seniors in public institutions going up by about 5,000 or 6,000 each year, the number of seniors was actually flat last year. We did not have an increase in the number of seniors. Now, in looking back, looking at additional data, what we've found that the number of juniors last year went up. So we expect this to be kind of a 1-year flattening of the number of seniors, and so we hope to see that increase. But one of the other, and it's been very consistent that about 90% of the seniors actually graduate, so we're making those assumptions. We looked at the seniors enrolling in higher ed. That actually has gone down this time by 1%, which doesn't sound like a lot. We have a lot of seniors. That's still 2,500 students. Fewer students that went from high school into college. So that's something that we'll be looking at to see if, when we get the workforce data, did a lot more of those students go into the workforce? So as we get more data, we'll continue. This is not the last time you're going to get to see some of this. So hate to tell you that. You'll probably get bored. So we'll go on to the next slide. This kind of gives a little bit of a few of the numbers. Dual credit went up. First time entering students, and that's from all sources. So it's not only those 2,500 straight from high school, but it's also Students that are older coming back are considered first-time enter if they haven't been in college before. That declined 5,000 statewide. It actually went up at universities by about 800 and down at community colleges by about 5,800. So again, that's one of those things that you might expect because they are closely tied to the workforce, that they're not having students coming in. First year persistence, that's fall to fall persistence, went down by about 1.5 percentage points. So that is another thing that makes us think that some of these, part of that is those, that's not going to be the Pell students, because if you can be on probation for a semester and you've only been there 2 semesters, you're probably less likely for that to be the Pell. Those are probably students going back into the workforce. Time to degree is something we've looked at. It has very, very slowly been going down. So that's a good thing because we're getting fewer and fewer. Now it's a very slow. It was gone from 10.13 semesters per graduate down to 10 semesters over a 5-year period. But it's going the right direction. It's getting lower. However, as students get out faster, they're not counted in the enrollment. So that will make your enrollment numbers go down. It's so slight that it's not really.
We're hoping with various other efforts that it will be a more significant factor in the future. But we thought it was important to point out that as you pursue improved time to degree and more student success, that it will mean they're in the pipeline for a shorter period of time, which is a good thing. And so we'll keep track of that as we go forward.
It's one of the things.
That would be a short-term impact, assuming we go back to being successful in bringing them in the front end of the pipeline. So that would just accelerate the velocity, which is what we want.
Mr.
Just as a point of information, going back to the previous slide, about 41% of high school seniors in Texas going on to higher education. Mm-hmm. In the highest achieving states, it's about 2/3 of high school graduates.
And it is important to add one thing. That's exactly correct, Commissioner. We don't usually talk about the fact if you track them 2, 3, 4 years that we have a much higher percentage going. So we have people entering at a later point in time, many of them community college students. But in terms of that initial entry from high school, we're far behind other states. But it suggests fewer people participate in higher education than really do when you see that we tend to lure them in at later points as well.
And if we look at the high school graduates, it's usually because only 90% of the seniors graduate. If we look at high school graduates, it's usually about 53 to 54%. So we'll wait and see in March how that happens, what happens there. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Excuse me. Okay. All right, the red line shows unemployment, and if you'll look, you can slightly see these are bachelor's graduates who move on into graduate school. You'll see a slight uptick in the number of or percentage of students that go on into graduate school, and then as the economy improves, it's going back down a little bit. And that's kind of what you'd expect to see as the economy improves. They're able to get jobs. They're not following up and going on into graduate school. We heard a lot of institutions say when the economy was, unemployment rate was going up, that their students were staying in and going ahead and getting a master's, that sort of thing. So we're seeing that kind of taper off. That's only about 300 students at this point, so it's not a huge amount, but it just kind of goes to the point that it's not one thing that's going to get everybody. It's a lot of different factors that are leading to the slowdown. Next slide. A couple of the things that we haven't been able to, it's very hard to put a number on it. There's been a lot of attention nationally about, articles on is a college degree worth it, that sort of thing. So, which would lead to students not even applying. So that's one of those things that's very hard to put an actual number to. We do think there's been an effect from these articles, but we can't pinpoint how much of an effect there has been.
But Susan, doesn't that also have something to do with what they're getting their degree in?
It does.
I mean,
it very definitely does. And it also has an effect on, or is part of, if they're going to have to take out loans versus not taking out loans to get that degree. So that all plays into it.
Susan and her staff are also related to that, conducting a study where they're looking at all graduates from all fields. They're looking 10 years back, and so they're looking at their initial salary, 5 years and 10 years, and then looking at any additional credentials, which historically you've seen for some of the fields, can be a catch-up after the 10 years initial employment that is a little slower, and the salaries aren't the same. But in the past, after 10 years, you could see an evening out. We're curious to see if that's still happening, or if it's just really changing in many ways. And we'll soon have a website, by the way, we do have information already on the website in terms of employment and salaries by institution across the state.
By discipline.
By discipline. And we're going to have something that's more accessible to the public that we're working out, developing with a group outside the state at the request of the governor's office. And that's actually been mentioned at least a couple times in the Chronicle of Higher Education recently. So that will be available to students so they can actually go in and do that kind of analysis themselves.
One of the things that we've seen, there's been a lot of discussion about the increases in tuition and fees at the universities. One of the things is community colleges, even though their tuition has not gone up as fast as some of the universities, it has still gone up. And those students might be more price sensitive. When we looked at tuition and fees for those institutions that went up over $500 in their tuition and fees at the community colleges, none of them had an enrollment increase. And so that's one of those things that makes you think that those students are more price sensitive, which would make sense. Another thing that we had is we had Lon Morris. It was a private, independent, two-year college. Actually closed its doors. They only had 400. It's a very small campus. They only had 480 students. And however, when we looked at them, we only found 184 that were still in higher ed. Right now, they could have gone out of state. They could have gone other places, but that's unfortunately students that were in higher ed and are no longer in there. So.
It's important to point out that OECD study that's been circulating this week, that very clearly says that the cost of higher education in the United States is a deterrent for poor students to go to college.
Sorry about that. Next slide. Oop, back one. There we go. We're going to talk about the population projections. We just received new population projections from the Texas State Data Center in mid-November. And this data compares the prior population projections we had to the 2010 census data. And as you can see, there's, the big one is that you've got 386,000 fewer Hispanic students in Texas, or not Hispanic students, but Hispanic population is 386,000 fewer than it was based on the projections. That's not that we're going down. It's not a decline in the number of Hispanics in Texas. It's just a change from what was projected.
We're not growing as fast.
We're not growing as fast as was expected. So that's one thing, and I'm going to show you some additional information and what that will do to when you use their new projections that include these 2010 census information, and what that compares to what we had prior for our projections. Now the next slide. Can we get there? All right. Technology is great when it works. In total, the population of Texas is not growing as fast as they expected. So by 2015, there's going to be a million fewer population, people in Texas than was originally projected. That's the Hispanic population. So if you look at our 2015, that has rippling effect all the way across. So there's fewer students now, or fewer people now. I'm so used to talking about the students. There's fewer people in the population, and a lot of those are at that college-going age. Not all of them, but at the college-going age. So that's going to make it even that much more difficult for institutions to attract students into their campuses, onto campuses.
I want to emphasize again that population will be larger. It just won't be as large as originally thought.
Out to 2020, we're still expected to grow by 3.8 million in population. So it's not that the population is shrinking, it's just not growing as fast as was originally expected.
And these projections that we're comparing to, the slower rate of continuing growth, were those the projections we relied on in 2005, or were they more recent projections from the 2010 census?
The ones that we're just now getting are the first ones that the Texas State Data Center has put out based on the 2010 census.
I believe you're asking, did we use...
What are we comparing to?
We're comparing to projections that were done by the Texas State Data Center in 2008.
2008, okay.
So the number then, if I'm understanding what you're saying, is it was projected to grow in 2020 by about 5.7 million, and instead it's going to be 3.8?
Right.
Is that okay?
Correct.
And I think, excuse me, I would say that
Contagious.
it's fair to assume that if the economy changes, these projections will change again in next 2 or 3 years.
They could, and usually the Texas State Data Center puts out new projections every 2 to 3 years. Originally, these projections that we just got in November were going to come out in April. They had some issues with some of where they get their data and that sort of thing. So they pulled them down, and then they just put them out again. So I know they've done a lot of work on them and done some verification of things. So, but these are the ones that we're seeing. Part of that, from what we've heard, is that part of that has to do with the fact that the economy in Mexico is growing, so you're not having as many people come across and come into Texas to find work. And so that has a lot to do with it.
And you will receive, in January, you'll hear a little bit about later today, new enrollment projections for the institutions, which we do every 2 years. And those have been delayed a little bit because they are based, in fact, on these enrollment or population projections, so we have the most current data. And it's a very detailed process. But so every 2 years, they're revised just to make sure they're as accurate as possible given the most recent projections.
Next slide. As I've mentioned a couple of times, this is not the last time you're going to hear about this. We're going to continue looking into it. We're going to continue to try and figure out, get very specific information on who's missing, who's not here, and what we can do about that, where we can make changes to our programs or policies that would help increase the enrollment again. High school graduate data, we get it in March each year. The flex entry students, which is actually a good thing. If the community colleges are focusing more on workforce and more on offering the programs when they're needed by the students and by the workforce, that's not a bad thing. They just don't show up in the census date enrollment, so they may be showing up later, and that's one of the things that we're going to be looking at. Specific data from TWC on the UI wage record we don't get. I mean, the quarter's just ending the end of December, so then there's a lag time while they get all the data collected and get it cleaned. So we don't get that until June, unfortunately. We can't use third quarter. But
6 months?
Yeah.
Yes.
And 9 months for the next one.
Yeah, that's the career school data. Career school data, they only report to us once a year. That's something we're actually, excuse me, we're talking to some of the four-year career schools because that has to do with transfer of community college students into the four-year colleges. The community colleges have just signed a big reciprocal agreement with WGU. So we would like to be able to include those students in the transfer count for the community colleges as part of their momentum points. So we're working with some of those. We're going to be talking to some of those career colleges to see if we can get a semester by semester enrollment. For some of the larger career colleges, it's probably not going to be a problem. For some of those colleges that only have, 300-400 students, that might be a little bit of a burden. So we're going to weigh that against make sure that we're not putting too much of a burden on them just for the reporting purposes. Are there any other questions?
Any other questions? Okay, Susan, we're going to be transferring you to the Texas A&M pandemic influenza facility.
Okay, I'm not running a fever. It's all sinuses. So
I am curious, have we shared this information with House Higher Education? It was Chairman Branch who...
We haven't shared it with him yet. I just finished it yesterday. So.
Okay.
But we intend to.
More formal write-up than just the PowerPoint, we think.
Yes,
so
we're working on that one. So this was just for your information. It's not anything to vote on.
Okay, I can't help but ask one more question. The factors that you listed, there were 8 contributing factors that we were analyzing. Does that indicate a priority order of impact?
No, okay. Because we don't have we can't really say. We know unemployment's gone down. We know how many additional people are employed. We don't necessarily know that those were all students.
There's a correlation, but
we don't have a.
So we don't have the data to say that it's increased employment that is the primary contributing factor.
We won't have that until we get those UI wage record data. Okay. And then we'll be able to say, we have fewer high school graduates going on, but we've got an increase in those that are going into the workforce. We have, fewer, our persistence gone down, but we saw a lot of those students that didn't persist in the workforce. A lot of it hinges on that workforce data that we'll have.
Thank you.
Okay. I believe that was 5F. Is that correct?
Did you want to go back to 5A3?
Yes, that's what I was going to do.
Okay.
Okay. Now that Dr. Paredes is with us, we'd like to go back to University of Texas, University Union renovation and expansion in Denton, Texas. I believe Chancellor Lee Jackson, Dr. V. Lane Rollins, President, Mr. James McGuire, Vice Chancellor of Administrative Services and Chief Architect, Dr. Elizabeth With, Vice President of Student Affairs, and Ms. Jean Bush, Senior Associate Vice President of Finance with the University of North Texas System will make the presentation.
And you've got some supplemental agenda materials at your place.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you, Susan, just as a point of information, is this briefing any different than the briefing that was emailed last week, or is it the same document?
It's the same. There is one other piece of information that was included yesterday because we had at UNT, Ms. Shepard and Mr. Leilani had requested it, so we've got a listing of projects that use student fees at your place.
Sorry for the delay, but we're glad you're here and we're ready to hear your presentation.
Chairman Hahn and members of the board and Dr. Paredes, we're glad to be here. We appreciate the opportunity to keep considering this project as it moves along. Lee Jackson will make the presentation. You introduced the members of the panel. I just wanted to say on the front end that we appreciate this opportunity, and it is an opportunity to help us think through how we're going to get this facility, which is so critical to quality education in this day and age. And I shared with a couple of board members a recent group of business leaders that we brought together to tell us what they needed in our new graduates. And the good news was that they told us that their graduates were very well prepared. If they said they were accountants, they were accountants. If they were engineers, they were engineers. But that they had very little social experience, they had very little leadership experience, they had very little experience in the kinds of things that I think in our generation we may have more naturally encountered in life. And these kinds of facilities are tools to provide that. And we have given a lot of thought to that and feel that we really think this is important to what we have promised our students when they come to the University of North Texas, which is a quality education. So we appreciate your consideration of it.
Mr. Chairman and members, thank you for being willing to expedite the consideration of this project and discuss it again. I was not with you a few weeks ago, and I don't want to repeat the ground that you've already gone over. Several of you have said you're pretty clear on the need for this kind of facility and the role it plays in a campus of 36,000 students. But there have been issues raised about cost to the students' role, turnout in the elections that you discussed this morning, and I guess we're glad that we were a catalyst for that healthy discussion. And so we're going to work with you, as we have now for over 40 years, to make sure that our proposals to you are compliant, as we believe that this one was. Because the issue of cost has become so central, instead of going back over the square footage and the details, I thought I wanted to say at least one point about cost on this next slide, and that is in comparing the University of North Texas to its emerging research university peers. We spend a lot of time looking at the total cost of attendance. So this is a slide that shows you the 8 emerging research universities in Texas with their total academic cost for resident undergraduates taking 15 semester credit hours. And it shows it back to 2003, the infamous year of deregulation. I was here in 2003, and frankly, the monitoring of cost was pretty uneven before that date. There were heated discussions about tuition that ignored the fact that the fastest rising element of college cost on many campuses was a collection of fees. They weren't just building specific fees, they were printing fees and health fees and all sorts of things. And of course, they weren't always disclosed as they should have been, and they weren't always discussed as centrally as they should have been in the legislature. One of the things that we, and I think your staff, committed to in 2003 was that from that time going forward, what really would matter is the total cost of attendance to a student taking a full load. And for purposes of comparison, we asked that all reporting, legislative and agency reporting, look at that, because without that, you really weren't able to compare apples to apples. In 2003, the University of North Texas was, as you can see, third among the 8 emerging research universities, and over the past decade, we've gone to 6th. That doesn't mean that our costs didn't go up. It meant that among those universities that are seeking to balance a quality undergraduate education, maintain relatively small class sizes, expand engineering and STEM programs, maintain nationally accredited academic disciplines, not just regionally or non-accredited programs, to expand research and make those research opportunities available to undergraduate students. Doing all of those things and trying to balance them, you look at how are you doing of balancing the overall cost to your students. And that's what this chart shows. We do take it very seriously. Our board discusses every time we discuss budgets, every time we discuss room and board rates, which are not included here, but they're obviously a factor, every time we discuss course fees, and certainly every time we discuss any tuition and fee debate. And so we believe there is a track record of showing that we've maintained a significant focus on cost. The next slide is a recap of the history of this project briefly. At the top you can see a photo of one of the very crowded little rooms that are available to our student groups. The Union is a unique building on most college campuses. We've gone from about 200 registered student groups to over 400 as our undergraduate enrollment has grown, and that's the primary driver for the need for a union. So we formed a very large committee, larger than our normal user group on the UNT campus, and started in the fall of 2009 looking at a renovation of that building. We determined that a renovation only was not feasible. The layout of the floors is such that you would spend an enormous amount of money trying to go in and fill in the atrium and make it into usable space, and we came up with this project. As soon as we came up with this project, working with professional programmers, we took a group of students to Texas A&M and looked at their then new union, and from there we went to Ohio State and to Wisconsin and looked at two of the other most modern, highly regarded union designs. And we started a series of campus planning forums. We had 8 of those in 2011. We had an intense series of events in spring. Throughout the month of March, we had 6 to 8 events on our campus that were planning meetings. They were entire weekend displays set up. We did something that I know in my past election experience wouldn't have necessarily been appropriate under the election code. We gave out free pizza and beer to students who would come to our planning meetings. And in the election code, you're not allowed to induce anyone to vote. Of course, we didn't induce them to vote, but we did everything we could to get campus participation to know about this April election. We had a turnout that was neither our highest nor our lowest. And I would only say that it is higher than the turnout in some local bond elections for the roads on which you drove to this meeting. So I think if, as you said this morning, if we could find ways where our universities could lead and actually have higher turnout than cities, school districts, state constitutional amendments, that would be a great thing. And if there are lessons we can learn from best practices, we ought to work with you to do that. But we did make an effort. We made an effort by our standards that was above average because of the importance of this project. And we're proud of the student support. Our student government and student leaders were absolutely convinced that this will enhance the quality of the undergraduate experience, not just in a recreational way, but in a way that's directly tied to their success as students and their success in life. And I have some other slides that are available to, if I can answer questions that go into cost aspects in greater detail, but you've already had a long morning, and so I think we might ought to stop and see if there are specific questions about the history of the project that we can answer or about cost.
Thank you. Members, questions, comments?
I'd like to ask the number of the total amount of capital that your institution has raised over this past 12 months and how that compares with the other 8 emerging research institutions in terms of total number of advancement dollars that UNT is raising compared to institutions like the University of Houston and other institutions that are considered y'all's peers?
While the president and staff are getting those, I have some numbers about the last 5 years from 2008 to 2012, and these are just for us. I don't have any comparisons at this point about whether it's above or below the levels of other universities. We've raised $42.7 million in the last 5 years.
You said 42?
42.7 over 5 years. It's pretty evenly spread. We have a capital campaign now in a quiet phase, and so it's expected that these things go up and down. Of course, some years are a little more intense. What was interesting to me, and the reason I asked for these numbers, expecting this discussion, was that 47% of our gifts have been for academic, specific, dedicated funds for a program. That's an endowed chair for a professor, a laboratory, a research activity. 44% are for scholarships, and the largest number of gifts are for scholarships. That's what more people are excited by than anything else. So when you add those two together, 47% dedicated to academic programs, 44% for scholarships, you get up to 91%. And then there are a few other small categories, but only 5% of our total gifts are for capital purposes. That is directly for building. And most of those were for our football stadium that opened 2 years ago. Now, that's an interesting example. As you get into this discussion about donations and facilities, athletics is historically an area where there are more gifts available, which is why you have a policy limit of 50% on student contributions for intercollegiate athletic facilities. And it is possible for athletic facilities to meet that 50% standard, as we did. But we only made it with 5% of direct contributions of gifts for capital. We had a naming gift that is in effect a marketing contract over 20 years. We're very proud of the fact that it's promoting neither beer nor pizza. And we're very proud of Apogee Stadium and the agreement that we reached in the middle of a worldwide recession. It was quite a groundbreaking. We also have suite leases available for a stadium that are not available for a wellness center or a rec center. We have concession revenues that increased, season ticket sales. So the athletic facilities have both donor appeal and revenue streams that are not traditionally available for most other university buildings, which is why most of the facilities on that list that are below the level you're now discussing of student contribution, a lot of them, I think 12 that I looked at, were athletic related. So it'll be easier for those type of facilities, as it was for us, to meet a test of non-student revenues.
Mr. Golden, if I could just elaborate on that. I think Lee is correct on the amount of cash that came in. I've been there a little over 2 years, and I was interested to note that University of North Texas had never completed a campaign. So we've been doing the planning for a campaign, and we've been soliciting gifts and pledges. And while that number of cash, I'm sure, is correct, in the same period there have been about almost $150 million of pledges and deferred giving that will come in at some point. So we will announce a campaign in April. We will announce a campaign of $250 to $300 million. This is not, by comparison to the Texas A&M or University of Texas numbers, it's not an impressive number. I've been president of 2 other institutions. I've just started a $1 billion campaign at the last one, but you have to take small steps before you can take big steps. I do think you ask a question of where we rank compared to the 8 institutions. I don't know the exact spot. When we did the numbers to see where we did just last year, we were right in the middle of the pack, because there are a number of other institutions there that are just getting started with this kind of enterprise. I certainly agree with you that it's important in the future of higher education, as clearly state support for higher education declines. It's not as bad in Texas as some other states, frankly. We will have to learn how to do this better, and we are devoting a lot of resources to it. And I appreciate the question, and it's certainly legitimate territory to be talking about.
I want to get clarification, because I heard the number that over the past 5 years, your total advancement dollars is around $42 million. Is that what I heard? And that was over the last 5 years?
That's cash received. That doesn't include estate agreements in which people have made pledges that will be realized, obviously, at an uncertain date in the future. Doesn't include multi-year pledges in which someone says every year for the next 5 years I'll make X. That's booked income.
What's the total amount of your endowment now at UNT in terms of dollars?
Endowment's around $100 million.
Yeah, about $105 million.
Okay. Your project's going to get approved. I said that last board meeting. But just as a note, we want y'all to do well. We want UNT to become a world-class institution. We want it to become a Tier 1 institution. But just as a matter of friendly advice, y'all are woefully behind in this area. And I'm not being critical. I'm just offering that as a means of encouragement that your university is in, if not the largest, the second largest metropolitan area in the state. I would encourage you to look towards getting the best and the brightest person you can to head your advancement division within your institution. I'm not trying to micromanage or get into your business. I know when I was regent at University of Houston, we went out and hired and paid over $500,000 for that individual. We raised $130 million this past year, in terms of total dollars in a city that's very comparable to yours, and we want to see y'all do equally as well or better than any other institution in the state. But with the declining number of dollars, as y'all have mentioned, in terms of our public dollars, in order for you all to get where we want y'all to be, and we know you can, all of our institutions, particularly in that group of emerging research institutions, are going to have to go after those private dollars. And honestly, let me say this, that was the only point that I was trying to make, and we've made that point. We've backed up. Let me say in the future, just as a matter of myself, I want anybody to feel free to call me and talk to me if for some reason we have a difference of opinion. You don't need to do an end around to the legislature, because I don't respond to political pressure too well. But I will sit down with you one-on-one and say, what can we do to get on the same page so we can move all the institutions in Texas forward collectively? I do have a concern that we tend to be acting independently as independent institutions and escalating what I've referred to as an arms race, trying to outdo one another, and that's not in the best interest of Texas. We've got to push Texas collectively forward so we can all become internationally competitive. Y'all need this project. It's quite clear. And no one, I don't think, here on this board has had a problem with the proposal. I personally wanted to make a point. It wasn't personal. Therefore, I will vote to support your proposal. But we've at least got an issue out on the table that we need to look at and evaluate, and that we can't continue to pile all these student fees on the back of students. And then when we clearly know that we're denying access to a large percentage of poor students, according to our commissioner who just pointed that out to us, is that when we go up $500 in community colleges, there's a certain number of students that just simply won't go. So I don't want y'all to think that, and I agree with the chancellor, you guys have came across or come through here at a time when, I know you probably feel like we've singled you out, which we didn't intend to. You feel like maybe we've kind of put you in the crosshairs, which that's not what our intentions were. Our intentions was to have a healthy debate on what it's costing our students and whether or not some of these projects at times may become a little extravagant, and maybe whether or not they truly, not necessarily this one, but I've seen some that I question whether or not they really are what our mission is in higher education. And I would strongly encourage you to look and finding the best and brightest person, not a person that you've got to grow, but a person who has a track record of success in the area of advancement and endowment, and be willing to invest that money in getting that right person in place. I don't know who you have. It's not my business. But I do know in my experience in the past, that's paid off. The endowment, the University of Houston, and I keep saying that because that's the institution I'm most familiar with, is embarking upon $1 billion capital campaign. And your endowment is just woefully lower than theirs. And I don't mean to be throwing them in your face, but we want you guys to be, Dallas is important. We need Dallas on board. We need UNT being all that UNT can be. So I just want to encourage you to think very carefully about how you organize your advancement, because that's going to be so vitally important to the health of your institution in terms of raising those private dollars and cultivating those donors. And there's plenty of them in Dallas. So it's going to take a cultural change within some of our institutions like UH. Some of these emerging research institutions are going to have to embrace a different culture if we're going to grow these emerging research institutions. Thank you for listening. I want to tell each and every one of you that if in the future, if you have a problem, I think with me or probably any member of this board, feel free to call us on the telephone, talk to us, because we're on y'all's team. We don't want to be adversaries. We don't want to be part of the problem. We want to be part of the solution. I respect each of one of y'all. I respect the fact that you're trying to do the best for your students, and that's what we want you to do. But we're also very, very sensitive to what it's costing some of these students to go to school.
Dr. Golden, thank you for your encouragement, for your support of the project, and I have to tell you the encouragement you're giving us to step up our advancement efforts is something we're in total agreement on. It's going to take a little while to change a culture that we did not have, but this president is working at it very hard, and we have a group of volunteers leading our first ever serious large capital campaign. We're going to make that effort.
Could I make another comment? I chaired the advancement committee on the Board of Regents, University of Houston, and I served on that board. I'd be happy to, not that I have all the answers, but I'd be more than happy to share with you some of the things that we did those 6 years I chaired that committee. And maybe I can help you, and I'd be happy to.
Mr. Goldman, you have a standing invitation. As long as I'm president, I'd love to have you come up. I'd like to. I have a new vice president for advancement, which probably wouldn't surprise you. I think he's the brightest star I've seen in a long time, and we'd love to sit down and talk with you.
You set the date, and I'll come, sir.
Love to.
Excellent. Any other comments? Thank you, Dennis.
Yes, Chairman. I want to take this opportunity to thank the UNT officials, all of you, for your hospitality with Janelle and myself last week, and particularly I think Taylor and Jaylene and Laura. If you folks ever decide to take a tour of UNT, do ask them as a tour guide. They're really good at it. Some of the observations I think we talked and discussed afterwards. I was really kind of taken back how badly you need a new facility. Let's just put it that way. A deferred maintenance issue like that, to be deferred so long, it concerns me. The lack of planning on the part of your board and your administration, and whether it's a current administration or current board or it's your predecessors, I hope the rest of your buildings and your facilities are not in the same condition as we saw that student union building. I also, kind of was disappointed in not having a more capital campaign, some funding available that would, so you may not have to put all the burden on the backs of students. But since Dr. Golden has spoken quite eloquently on that subject, I'm not going to add any more comments to that. But we do want you and your students to have that facilities. And with that, if Mr. Chairman, if you would indulge it, unless there's any more conversation, I'd like to make a motion that we do approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Durga, can you hear us? Durga, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. I have a recommendation here that in future capital campaigns that they have, that 250 million they're talking about, they should allocate at least 25% for buildings and the rest 75% for academic program and the scholarships. That way they can raise money for the buildings and they don't have to penalize students and collect money from the students. 25%, 37.5%, and 37.5%. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. There is a motion and a second. I'm going to call for that vote now, and I just wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to vote. So all those in favor, let's just do it. Sound off. You're in favor?
Yes.
Or opposed? You're in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Bobby? Durga? Durga, yay or nay?
Yes. Aye. Yes.
Okay. The motion is approved. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you for your time.
I believe we're now on item 5H. That's the update of the coordinating board's priorities for the 83rd Texas legislative session. Linda Battles, Associate Commissioner, and Dominic Chavez, Senior Director of External Relations, will provide information to the committee. Good morning, Dom.
Good morning. I will be brief because obviously not a lot has happened with the legislative session, but for those of you who weren't here last legislative session, we have a standing item from this point going forward until session ends at this committee as well as at the board level to provide updates on what's happening with the legislative session, both in terms of our budget, which typically Linda will do, but obviously nothing's happened on that front yet, as well as our legislative priorities that the board has approved, as well as other issues related to higher education. So just to give you a sense that we'll be updating you regularly as we go through the next 6 or 7 months, as it were. Again, not much has happened in terms of higher education bills. We're in the process of tracking bills as they're being filed. There's a couple noteworthy bills. For example, Representative Branch has filed a bill to amend House Bill 9. As you'll recall, that was the bill that established a process for the coordinating board to work with institutions to develop outcomes-based funding models. What his bill is doing, and it's perhaps appropriately, and I believe it was intentional, it's House Bill 25, because he's seeking to raise the limit that was established in that bill from looking at 10% based on outcomes-based funding to 25%. Now, one thing I want to make clear is his legislation would not execute 25% this session. This legislation is forward-looking. It would basically direct us, if it should pass, that the next time we go through our formula funding advisory process, that we would be under direction to look at options up to 25%. Again, just to remind you, our outcomes-based funding proposal, for it to be executed, actually goes through the budgetary process. And that process obviously hasn't kicked off formally, but we've been working closely with LBB and legislative leaders on the Finance and Appropriation Committees to have that conversation, and we'll fill you in on where we are with that as we go forward. Just a couple other bills I'll mention. House Bill 30 by Representative Dan Branch has refiled the bill that if many of you were here or some of you were here last session, he had a comprehensive transfer bill. He has refiled that bill because it did not pass in its entirety last session. That bill includes one of the board's legislative priorities, which is to cap associate's degrees at no more credits than what's required by an accrediting body or licensure for that field. So that one element is in his bill. That bill would also essentially formalize in statute the tuning process that we've been undergoing as an agency for the last 2 or 3 years. The idea that we work with institutions to align curriculum both vertically and horizontally, particularly in the upper division major related coursework, so that those courses will transfer seamlessly into a 4-year university. The difference is his bill would mandate that institutions sign off on those compacts once they're developed. Whereas, as you know, our process currently is optional. We work with the institutions, but the purpose of them signing on is not we're not mandating that they sign those compacts. So that's another key piece of legislation. I think there will be a lot of dialogue and debate about that, since transfer is going to be, I believe, a significant higher education issue this session, based on the number of a couple other bills that have been filed regarding that. Other than that, those are some of the, just kind of skimming my list here, those are some of the major bills. I will mention a couple Senate bills. Senator Zaffirini has filed a bill related to Be On Time. It is not the Be On Time recommendation that this board has put forth. Instead, her bill, essentially what's been filed is to address the Sunset Committee's recommendations that the Be On Time program be limited to university only and not to community college students. So essentially that's what her bill as filed does. She also is recommending that some changes to the money as is appropriated for the National Research University Fund, primarily because, as you'll recall, that fund, the calculation for how to appropriate the dollars once institutions meet those thresholds, was changed last session. But you'll recall last session we only had 7 emerging research institutions. We now have 8 because of the University of Texas, or I should say Texas State San Marcos has now joined the pool of eligible students, and so she's making some changes in that legislation to reflect that. So those are just a few of the items that have actually been filed. I'll just briefly give you an update on what we've been doing since the agency staff and the commissioner have been doing since the board passed their recommendations in October. We started almost immediately a pretty extensive outreach effort, meeting with legislative staff, meeting with key legislators, meeting with stakeholders such as our financial aid advisory committees, meeting with other stakeholders like MALDEF and others who have a stake in higher education but aren't necessarily part of higher education itself. To brief them on the major board priorities, make sure everyone understands what our recommendations are, provide them the data analysis to support it. For example, as you may recall, our Texas grant proposal was heavily influenced and informed by the great research that the Higher Education Policy Institute and Lee Holcomb did, and so we've been sharing that information, which has been very helpful as people understand what it is the board's trying to achieve in terms of their recommendations. So we've been essentially have met with staff from the key higher education committees, the leadership offices, as well as other key stakeholders. Most of the legislative recommendations are in the process of being drafted. Again, as I've mentioned, only one piece of one element of the board's proposals has been actually filed, and that's the 60-hour. But there's a number of opportunities out there right now where legislators are looking at these recommendations but haven't formally submitted any of them for actual bill filing. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and I do. Mr. Chairman, you asked the question earlier whether we had shared the information about enrollments, the updated presentation. We did share those with leadership offices last night, so Susan Brown's presentation was shared with them, and we're going to be sharing with the full committees today. So I want to make sure I was in the back and I didn't want to yell it. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Just the bill numbers for the two bills you highlighted.
House Bill 25, which is the Representative Dan Branch's formula funding bill, House Bill 30, which is the comprehensive transfer bill, and the two that I talked for Senator Zaffirini were Senate Bill 27, which was the Be On Time bill, and Senate Bill 30, which is related to the NREF calculation.
Thanks.
And what we'll be doing, and again, we're still kind of early on in the process, but we will be doing and working with Linda Battles, who acts as a liaison with the board in terms of sharing information. We'll be providing, as we get deeper into the session, I guess weekly. Have we decided that? Weekly updates where we'll provide you a tracking so you can see how these are progressing and as new bills are being filed. We obviously haven't started that because I don't think we've reached a critical mass yet.
Any other questions or comments? Not, thank you very much, Dom. Next item on the agenda is lunch. Very important item. 30 minutes. About 12:15, we'll be back.